Hey, my name is Kaleb Crabtree, and I'm so glad that you decided to click on this video. This is a message from our youth group this past Sunday night that we call Grace Student. I pray that God uses it specifically in your life to touch your heart and to move you forward in faith. So enjoy it.
Anyways, the last couple weeks, we started a series that we called What I Really Want, and the conversation has been centered around the word freedom. Everybody say freedom. Whoa, that like came on. We were talking about freedom, and what we're doing is talking about freedom. Why? Because we all kind of desire more freedom in our lives, and we have a little bit of a misunderstanding of freedom sometimes. And sometimes the kind of freedom we can desire is not actually the way that God designed and defined freedom, but it's a way that we kind of want to in our own cultural understanding. And just as teenagers, wanting more freedom for curfew or for different things to be able to make your own decisions and whatnot. And so we've looked at this word freedom, and so this week, let me go ahead and start by asking you this question. Have any of you ever paid attention to warning labels on the back of like different items and things? Anybody ever paid attention to warning? Okay, a couple of y'all. But here's the thing: like there are things that you would never expect to be on a warning label. For example, let me read you a couple. There's a warning label on chainsaws that say, "Do not hold the wrong end of the chainsaw." Like, how dumb is that? Like, who's going to grab a chainsaw by the part that cuts down the tree? Because your hand stands no chance. It's free advice for you, just don't cut off your hand. You know those things you put on your in your car that kind of like block the heat from coming into the car, and then you remove them before you drive? There's a warning label on them that says, "Do not drive with the sun shield in place." Like, who's going to do that? Okay, I hate when that happens, right? Like these dummies, like what dummy would do that? Drive with the sun shield in place. Okay, let me throw another one in. There's a warning label on a washing machine that says this: "Warning, do not put any people in the washing machine." And you're like, but you haven't met my siblings, But it says don't put people in washing machines. But I know you do want to shove your younger sibling into the washing machine. That's not advice that I'm giving you. That's not advice I'm giving you. Don't tell your parents, "I learned I should put my sibling in a washing machine," even though it's against the warning label. Anyways, let me throw a couple more out there. There's a warning label on a carton of eggs that says, "Warning, may contain eggs." Stupid, right? There's a warning label or a sticker on a wheelbarrow that says, "Not intended for the highway." I just got a whole list of these. These are free for you. This one's great. There's a warning label on a stroller that says, "Remove child before folding." I haven't tried that one on Maverick yet, but I'm trying not to traumatize my kid. But here, check it out. There's warning labels on all sorts of things. I can think about the story. I don't know if you guys heard this, but there was one on the news where a lady sued McDonald's. You know what I'm talking about? Lady sued McDonald's because it was hot when she got hot chocolate or coffee, sorry. Like, how dumb do you have to be to know that the cup's not, like, it's not going to be cold when you get something hot? But she sued McDonald's, and she lost. But here's the reality. It's whatever. I think she lost. Maybe she won. I don't really remember the whole story. She won? Wow. Anyways, moral of the story is there's warning labels on all sorts of things, and a lot of these are funny, but then you ask the question, was there really somebody who did that before? Like, was there really somebody who folded their kid up in a stroller? Was there really somebody who grabbed the wrong end of a chainsaw? Was there really somebody who didn't know eggs were in the carton? Was there really people who did not know these things? I don't know. I got these online. Okay. But here, check it out. Warning labels show up everywhere, right? And here's the thing. It's not just on sun shields and washing machines and chainsaws. But warning labels show up in church, right? Warning labels show up in church. In fact, maybe you felt like you get warned about more things in your life than anywhere else in the walls of the church. You get warned about all sorts of activities and choices that you make, and the way that those things will interact with your life and what will kind of be produced from some of those choices. And here's the reality. All of those things boil down to one word. Anybody know what it is? Sin. Sin. Just hearing the word sin kind of brings a little bit of a negative vibe to the room as we talk about sin. And so we can think that church is just a bunch of a place where you're just constantly warned about everything, and it all comes back to this concept of sin. And we all can understand that sin is something we should avoid. Fair? Like bad choices, sin is something that we should avoid. But we can also think of sin in a way where it's a sliding scale. Like some sin is worse than others. When we think of sin, we can think in a way that some sins have to be worse than others. Like, of course, I shouldn't disrespect my parents, but at least I'm not murdering somebody in a back alley. Fair? Like, I just was a little disrespectful. I didn't murder somebody and just leave them there and walk away. Kind of like Bella in the back of the car. It's a joke. If you weren't there, don't worry about it. But isn't murdering somebody a little bit worse than disrespecting my parents? Or maybe I shouldn't lie. Fair, right? We probably shouldn't lie. Probably shouldn't lie to my parents. Probably shouldn't lie to friends. Probably shouldn't lie to coaches. Probably shouldn't lie to teachers. But that can't be near as bad as robbing an old lady when she's walking the street. Fair? Like, surely that sin can't be as bad. We know that we probably shouldn't cheat on a quiz or a test at school. But that's not as bad as beating somebody up in the hallway, is it? Moral of the story is we can think of sin in a sliding scale, and it brings us to this question. Maybe you want to write it down if you're taking notes tonight. The question is this: does all sin matter the same? Does all sin matter the same? Is it possible that maybe we're overreacting to some sin more than other sins because one is more of a big deal than another? That's the question that we maybe ask in our lives tonight. We're going to go back to the book of Galatians. Everybody say Galatians. And we spent the last 2 weekends here, but we're going to look at this. Just a recap of Galatians. Galatians is a letter that was written by the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul is the most famous, probably the most famous missionary who ever lived. He wrote to a group of new followers of Jesus when he writes this letter that we call Galatians. And to best understand what Paul is saying and why he's saying, it's important for us to know Christianity was a new thing at the time that Paul wrote this letter. People were just hearing about this Jesus guy for the first time and the story of his death and his burial and his resurrection, and people were hooked to this message. They were hooked to what it offered, and what they saw was that Jesus had come to give a picture of who? God. He had come to give them a picture of God. He was God. He talked about God's kingdom coming to earth. He talked about things that were revolutionary and things that completely flipped the understanding that they had before upside down. He didn't talk about it with this force or this rude kind of way that was violent or forceful, but instead he spoke a message that was very merciful, and it was very loving, it was very compassionate. And people were seeing that God was different than the way that they had understood him before from a lot of rules and laws and regulations. And so it's really catching their attention, right? When something is very countercultural to what you have heard before, it kind of catches your attention. And this was the message that was they wanted to come and be a part of it, right? When you hear something that's countercultural from the way everything else is being done, you want to be a part of it. And so this comes with a number of questions that they're asking as Paul's writing, and everybody's trying to figure out what following Jesus should look like in the world that they're living in right now at the time that this is being written. They wanted to know, they particularly wanted to know, what is it that I have to do? And what is it that I'm not supposed to do? Basically, they wanted to know, in the same way that you and I ask the question, is there like a sliding scale to this? Is there some things that are worse, and are there some things that aren't as bad? Let's look at what Paul says in Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 through 9. It says this. Paul answers these questions that they're asking by this statement. You will harvest what you plant. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest, what does that say? Decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Now, you may wonder what this has to do with that question of sliding scale. Now, what we have to understand is at this time when this is written, it was people lived in an agricultural culture, okay? Everybody say agriculture. They lived in an agricultural culture. What that means is that their whole economy revolved around what was planted and what was grown and then what was sold. So this statement makes so much sense to the audience that Paul is writing. And maybe it doesn't make as much sense to us, but let's try to unpack it tonight. What he's saying is when it comes to farming, you reap what you sow. Say it. You reap what you... Let me put it another way. What you plant is what is going to grow. Fair? Whatever you plant, whatever you put in the ground, if you plant corn, what's going to come up? Not tomatoes, right? You plant corn, you get corn. What you plant now determines what is going to be harvested later. And so when Paul is talking about this and he's comparing it to the choices that they're making in their life, which is just as relevant to you and I tonight as it was to them in their culture at the time that he's writing this letter, they understood exactly what he's saying when he's making an agricultural connection to the choices that they're making. Now, write this down. Paul was telling them this, that their choices now will determine their outcomes later. Their choices right now in the present moment, the choices that they're making as they're going through life right in those present moments will actually will be the outcomes later. What they're choosing to do now have a direct impact on the outcomes later. This is so good for you and I. Because a lot of times what you can think as a teenager and what I can think in my own life is what I choose to do right now it doesn't really make a whole bunch of difference in my future. I'll live differently when maybe you think as a young person, I'll live a little bit different, a little bit more wise. I'll make a little bit better choices when I'm an adult. And then when an adult comes, when that time in your life comes, then you'll be like, I'll make wiser choices later. Why? Because we think that what we do right now doesn't make that much of a difference down the line. Is that fair? But what we do now has a huge impact on the outcomes later. What's true about crops is true about your life and is true about my life. Let me put it this way. I don't have it in a slide, but maybe you want to write this down. Your decisions will someday bear fruit or they'll bear consequences. Your decisions right now as a young person one day will either bear fruit or they'll bear some sort of consequence. It may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen a week from now. It may not happen a month from now. But it'll happen sometime down the line. This is such a huge truth. Every choice, you want to write this down. Every choice and action is planting a seed for your future. Write that down. Every single choice in your life and in my life is planting a seed that is for your future. Paul's asking this question, and I want you to ponder it tonight. If one day your life harvests what you've planted, what is your life going to look like? If one day your life harvests what you're planting right now as a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old, if one day the harvest of the choices that you're making now comes about, what will your harvest look like? Instead of giving the Galatians a simple list of what they should avoid and what sins they should take more seriously, like this sliding scale thing is total garbage, might I add, he gives them this. Look at this. He says this. Galatians 6, verse 8, it says this. Those who live only to satisfy their sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. Now, I don't know about you, that sounds pretty harsh. like you're going to harvest death and decay. That's really strong language. But Paul feels very strongly about what he is telling these people. And remember that Paul has a relationship with these people. He loves these people so much. He cares about this church so much. And he loves them in this letter. And he's willing, remember, He's willing to tell them things that are hard for them to hear. Why? Because he loves them. He's telling them, maybe you want to write this one down too. He's telling them that bad choices are going to lead to bad outcomes. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. And you may say, oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah, bad choices are going to lead to bad outcomes. But what you and I probably have a lot in our life to change. Because we think it's simple on the surface, but yet then we go and live the same way when we leave the doors. It's just how life works. Bad choices are going to lead to bad outcomes. Here's the thing. If tonight you're asking the question, what sin matters more than others? Like, yeah, maybe I lie a little bit. Maybe I've cheated on a test. Maybe I've done this thing or I've done that thing, but I haven't murdered anybody. I ain't robbed nobody. I'm not out doing drugs and drinking my head blind. I'm not doing any of that. I'm not doing all those really bad sins, but I'm doing these things. This is the reality. You're asking the wrong question. It's not a matter of what sin is worse than another sin, and the question is not, what can I get away with? What Paul is saying is we need to be asking the question, what do I want my life to harvest? What outcome do I want in my life? What do I want my life to harvest as I continue to go day in and day out? It's not what can I get away with? What can slide under the rug? What can just be bad choices and whatnot? But yet it's not bad enough as everybody else's. But it's not the question of that. It's what do I want to harvest with my life? Because here's the thing: every decision has a harvest. For example, maybe you think that gossip isn't that big of a deal. Anybody ever struggle with gossip? Ever struggle with gossip? If nobody raises their hand, like, come on. All right. A few of y'all are perfect. I struggle with gossip, but maybe you don't consider gossip that big of a deal, but eventually if you continue to plant gossip in your life, what are you going to harvest? Eventually you may ruin a friendship. Anybody ever had a friendship ruined because of gossip? Maybe you weren't the one who gossiped, but maybe somebody gossiped about you, and that ruined the friendship. And so gossip was the root of the problem. Maybe sometime in the future that friendship will end, or maybe somebody will carry those hurtful words that you said about them for years down the line. Maybe if you continue to not study and you just cheat off of somebody's answers in class, you won't have the foundation that you need for the next step that you want to take in college or the next step of your studies. Maybe you continue to lie, and then what happens is that you're never trusted in the future. You plant lies, and then you're not trusted. Are you getting what I'm saying? When you and I plant bad things in our life, the outcomes are not what we want to get to. And so what we have to do is we have to change the question from what can I get away with to what do I want to harvest. If you're planting good decisions, you're going to harvest life, things that give you peace and joy and rest and comfort. And they'll begin to take root in your life. Jesus said it this way in John chapter 10, verse 10. You could throw it up on the screen, April. It says this: my purpose is to give them a rich, and what's that other word? Satisfying life. Some translations use the word full or abundant. But imagine the idea of an abundant and full, rich and satisfying harvest in your life of things like joy and comfort and peace, understanding, satisfaction in God. I'd love for you and I to start asking the question, what seeds do I want to plant in my life? What seeds right now as a teenager do I want to plant in my life to see a harvest of all that God wants to do and for my life to bear fruit? What kind of things do I want to grow out of my life? Do I want friendships to be wrecked? Do I want poor choices to just continue to overflow in my life? Or do I want what do I want to grow out of my life? Do I want to be somebody who is known for their relationship with Jesus? Do I want to be somebody who is known as somebody who can be trusted because I haven't planted lies and dishonesty? What if you and I had the filter of what do I want to plant and what do I want to grow out of my life as we went through every single decision? Every single moment of school, every single moment of your family, every single moment of your friendships. For some of us, the problem tonight is that we ask the wrong questions. It's so easy for teenagers. It's so easy for people in general. I don't just want to isolate this to teenagers, but I know it's easy in teenage culture, and at your age, it's easy for me at my age. I know y'all think I'm old. I'm only 26. I'm not that old, much older than y'all. I know y'all think I'm old, but whatever. But check it out. It's so easy for us to ask the wrong questions. Of what can I just get away with? Like, how can I just slide by as a Christian and just, like get out of hell, but, like, still get into heaven and, like, just totally kind of pass by the real question of, what do I want my life to produce for the kingdom of God? What do I want God to do through me because I planted wise choices and he worked through me and then there was fruitful outcomes in my life? The asking the wrong question, write this down or take note of this. Asking the wrong question can lead to harvesting the wrong things. Asking the wrong question can lead to harvesting the wrong things. And I bet if you sat in your seat, you would say, years down the road, I don't want to get to this place I never wanted to get to. I don't want to get to a place that is the product of harvesting bad outcomes. Years down the road, you and I, if we continue to live in a way that's just asking the wrong questions of what can I get away with, instead of what do I want to plant and what do I want to grow, we'll get to a place that where we're wondering, how did I even get here? How did I even get to this place? You can use your freedom to ask, is this helpful? Is this a helpful way to live towards people? Is this a kind way to live towards people? Is this the abundant, full, satisfying life that Jesus was talking about? And we're actually growing what we want to grow in our lives. Write this down. This is the last thing. Write this down. How you use your freedom determines how much freedom you have later. How you use the freedom that you have right now determines how much freedom you have later. Do you want to get more freedom from your parents, hypothetically? Let's throw that one out. You want more freedom from your parents? Well, then plant trust right now with your parents. Make decisions that plant trust with your parents so they can say, this is a child I can trust to go and make the right choice when they're with that group of friends who is making unwise choices. Or plant honor for your parents now. Respect them in the way that they deserve to be respected, not the way that you talk to them because that's the way your friends talk to their parents. Plant respect for them. Do you want healthy friendships? How many of y'all want healthy friendships and relationships? You want healthy friendships and relationships? Well, then why don't you plant kindness towards people rather than hate? Why don't you plant speaking the truth and actually deflating gossip rather than participating in it? Are you tracking with me? Be people who plant that. Be honest. Be compassionate towards people. You want more freedom? Let's say just with finances. Let's just throw that out there. How many of y'all want a little more freedom with your money? You know what I mean? I know I want a little more freedom with my money. But you want a little more freedom with your money? Well, then maybe you have to plant patience and not have a hole in your pocket every time you get something. You have to have self-control and wisdom. Do you get what I'm saying? All I'm saying is that every single decision we make has an outcome later, and it either can bear fruit or it can bear some kind of consequence and an outcome that you and I don't want. Following Jesus is about freedom. Following Jesus is about life. And here's the reality. Jesus wants to give you a full, a satisfying, and an abundant life. Here's the reality. But you don't start a harvest with harvesting. You start a harvest with planting. Y'all track with me? You don't microwave a harvest. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like a quick fix. It's kind of like a crock pot. It slow cooks. A harvest doesn't just happen like immediately. It's a planting. It's a process. It's growth. And you and I need to be very wise with the things that we choose right now that we're planting in our lives. And you need to know this when it comes to planting and when it comes to harvesting and when it comes to the consequences of sin. Because here's the thing. When we harvest the effects of our sin, we always are led to consequence. There's always something that happens in our lives. But this is where sometimes all times it's wrong. God is not punishing you. Check it out. God is not just out to get you. when we harvest the consequences of sin, it's natural consequences that you and I deserve. It's not God just out to get you because you did something wrong. As a matter of fact, let me say this tonight. God isn't out to get you. Let me read it the way I said it. God is trying to protect you from the consequences of your sin. That's the truth tonight. God wants to protect you from the consequences of your sin. God is protective of you and knows the consequences of what your sin will do in your life. God is so protective of the consequences of your sin that he was willing to give Jesus so that you didn't have to receive the consequence of your own sin, but he put it on Jesus. He loves you. He's not out to get you. He doesn't want those things for your life. So he wants you to use the freedom that you have to make wise choices that produce what? A harvest of life, everlasting life, and not death and decay. Y'all tracking with me? We're going to go here into a time of worship. And what I want to do here is I want us to think about what you want to plant in your life right now as a teenager. As you sit in your seat right now, what do you want to plant in your life as a teenager? You want to plant being a person who's kind? Do you want to reap the harvest of kindness? Or do you want to reap the harvest of honesty? Do you want to reap the harvest of trust? Like, what do you want to plant right now? What seeds do you want to plant right now in your life so that you can see the harvest and the fruit of all that God wants to do with those things, and it'll bear fruit rather than bear the consequences of sin? Are y'all tracking with me? I want us to think about what it is that we want to plant. And what I want us to do during the time of worship, we're going to do one song, is I want you, under your seat, you have a pen and you have paper. And I want you to write down what it is that you want to plant in your life. Is it kindness? Is it trust? Is it honesty? Is it transparency? Is it love? Is it grace? Is it love towards other people? What is it? You know, what do you want to plant in your life so you can see the harvest of the fruit of all that it is that God wants to do with it later? And then what I want you to do is when you write that up, I want you to fold it up, crumble it up, and I want you to come and bury it in this pot. Now, I know that paper isn't going to produce flowers or trees or any of that stuff, but I want it to be a moment where you as a teenager right now can visually say, this is what I want to plant in my life, and I want to see God's harvest out of all of that. And so while we're doing the next song of worship, I want you to take a moment, sit in your seat. Maybe when you're done, you want to come up, you want to just bury it there in the dirt, and then come back to your seat and worship, or I'll bring a leader or two up. If I can have a guy leader and a girl leader come up to the corners, and we can pray. If you want to receive prayer, maybe you are sitting in your seat and you're thinking, you know, hey, I sometimes am living in a way that it would harvest a lot of ugly things, and I don't want that, and you want some prayer. But during this next time of worship, write down, what do you want to plant in your life to see the fruit of the harvest of God later? So tonight, if you're sitting in your seat and you don't have a relationship with Jesus, and you know, this question can sometimes be hard to answer, but if you died tomorrow and you wouldn't know that heaven is your home, that you would go and be with Jesus forever, you don't have a relationship with Jesus. You don't have a relationship with him. But tonight, you want a relationship with Jesus. You want that life that he has to offer, that everlasting life. He's not out to get you. God's not out to get you. He loves you, wants to protect you from the consequences of sin. As a matter of fact, he wants to save you from death, save you from your sin. And you would say tonight, you know what, Pastor Caleb, I want a relationship with Jesus. I don't have one, but I want to start one. You could pray a simple prayer of faith like this. It's a simple starting place, and it's a long journey after that. Most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. But it's not always the easiest. But you say, I want a relationship with Jesus tonight. You can pray a simple prayer of faith like this. Just say, Dear God, I recognize tonight that you love me and that you sent Jesus to die for me. And I ask tonight that you would forgive me of my sins and that you would help me move forward as I leave this place. Would you forgive me of my sins, and would you help me to go out and be like Jesus as I leave this place?
Well, hey, I hope you enjoyed the message. I hope that God used it specifically in your life. Regardless of what you're going through, I pray that he used it in your life. We would love for you to join us in person at Grace Student Night, Sunday nights from 6 to 9 p.m. See ya.